The internet is cracked, the show that asks the question, can we coexist with our creation?
Hello, I'm Seth Camillo.
And I am Caroline Risberg, and we are The Internet is Cracked for Addicts by Addicts.
And today we are lucky enough to have Dr. Justin Romano joining us. And Dr. Justin Romano is a child and adolescent psychiatrist at Cheyenne Regional Hospital. He has his own podcast, which you should check out, called Millennial Mental Health Channel. Dr. Romano has also given a very, very successful TED Talk about cell phone addiction, and we are just so pleased to have him here today.
Hello, nice to be here. And yes, Dr. Romano, I'm an addict, and I'm happy to be here. Happy to talk about this subject.
We're all addicts, I think. I love that. My name is Seth Camillo, and I am an addict as well.
I am Caroline Risberg, and I'm an addict as well. I'm glad to clear that out.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being here and talking to us about this. And so we have a little question here. In your practice, in your private life, what's your overview thoughts on the internet and cell phone addiction?
Great question. I think this is something that we can only really compare to smoking in terms of some type of addiction, something that has come out in terms of its widespread use. But even if you compare it to smoking, people are using their cell phones way more than people actually smoked. And I threw out some of these statistics in the TED Talk, but even at the peak of tobacco smoking, only 45% of Americans actually smoked. But right now, 97% of Americans own a smartphone.
Wow.
I think even in the past couple of years, there has been somewhat of a movement where people are starting to realize, and you see memes about this, you see TikToks about this, of people saying like, I'm addicted to my phone. Like, I need my phone. The general social knowledge about this subject appears to be moving in that direction of being more self-aware about it, which I think is an important thing. But I think essentially we let the tech companies give us an addiction so that we would have brand loyalty and do what they want us to do so they can monopolize our time. And they've been incredibly successful at it.
Why do you think there is some talk about it, but given that 97% of population is addicted to something, it's really not discussed. Your TED Talk was very unique. There doesn't seem to be warning signs going out. Why do you think that is?
I have thought a lot about this question, and I've got some theories, but nothing I can actually back up with evidence and studies and data. I do think there is somewhat of a social human-wide denial about the problem that has gotten a little bit better, kind of like I mentioned earlier. People are starting to make memes about it, talk a little bit more. I could also my algorithm on my social media might be showing me more of that stuff because of the TED Talk, and that's what I gravitate towards. But I think for a long time, people did not want to admit that this was an actual problem. People did not want to admit that it was getting in the way of their jobs, getting in the way of their social life, getting in the way of their relationship with their parents, with their children, with their significant other. Because if you look at any addiction, there's almost always a solid denial period at the beginning of it, where you ask someone addicted to heroin or methamphetamine, they say like, oh, this isn't a problem. I could stop anytime I want to. It's not getting in the way of my life at all. So I was seeing a lot of parallels with the people I was working with addiction and everyone in my life who was struggling with cell phone addiction and overuse. So I definitely think that's a big part of it, is just the denial aspect of it. I also think, where do we get our information these days? From social media. And so I think, and this is all just speculation, and who knows, there could be someone showing up at my house for saying this, looking to harm me and my family. But I think there might be some element of suppression out there for things like this, because the powers that be, the people who control a lot of the tech in this country, how we obtain our information, probably don't want us talking about this too. So that is all maybe a little bit conspiracy theory, tinfoil on the head sort of thing, but I think that's a possibility and something we should at least need to look into as a society.
Well, clearly they have billions and billions of dollars at stake if this became I mean, as you said, it is not in the DSM.
The DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It is our Bible for psychiatric diagnoses in this country. So if you want to be diagnosed and treated for a mental health problem in this country, it pretty much needs to either be in the ICD-10, the coding and billing system, or in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM.
So it's not even in there.
It's not. And I was going back and looking at some of why it's not in there. And if you look at some of the papers and periodicals and letters to the editor, some of the minutia stuff around that time period, probably 2010 to 2017-ish, a lot of people are just arguing over details. Like, how could this be an addiction if it's not something like... It's not actually addressing the fact that people are using this more and more and then meeting a lot of the same criteria for addiction. It's like, well, if it is an addiction, well, how do we even categorize it? How do we even what do we call it? And so they weren't actually addressing the problem. They were just kind of jumping around the topic and arguing things that didn't really make any sense or make any difference.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I've heard several of, I don't have children myself, but several of my friends who have children, where they have noticed the children, they don't even talk to each other with text.
Yeah.
I just, it's like what's happening with our social skills. If we can't sit in a room and talk and, I don't know. So I wonder for you, is that something that is worrisome just on very basic level?
Absolutely. I think that our generation that grew, or the generations that grew up without technology, I always wonder if our society is going to change fundamentally and those in-person social skills are just going to be gone the next couple of generations. They're just not going to exist anymore. And that might just be the new norm of the way technology is pushing our species. Whether that's a good thing or not, I'm not sure yet. But the way our world works right now is that it does help to have social skills and in-person skills. And there was another good TED Talk that I just recently watched that claimed that 93% of free time for 18-year-olds is taken up by the screen. So, yes, like the average screen time for someone who's a teenager is about 8 or 9 hours a day. But if you break down, kids are at school, kids are doing chores, sometimes kids are at work. But if you actually break down their free time, it's 93%.
I would believe that.
I believe that too.
Yeah. And we're seeing that's the thing. And when we spend so much time on our screens, there are some downstream effects of that. In the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, kids wanted to be out of the house. They wanted to go spend time with their friends. They wanted to go to the mall. But now kids these days get all of their social interactions from their screens, or at least 93% of their free time is spent getting social interactions on their screens. So there's less drive to leave their house. There's less drive to learn how to drive because you don't need to leave the house as much. There's less drive to be independent. And it's totally changing what it means to be a human and a young person when these patterns have been what was the same thing for thousands of years. Screens and technology are changing everything.
Yeah, I can see that. And all this is changing, like what you said, things have been for thousands of years how we interact. And now is whatever, how many years it is, it's changing so quick and it's so fast. And just, for example, the what do you call it, attention span. Mm-hmm. But I've heard like, if you're going to do something, it got to be within 20 seconds because no one's going to pay attention if it's longer than this and this and that. And I think one of my questions is do you think, I mean, it's hard to say because everything is just now. Do you think we're going to change mentally eventually? Like, are we going to, what is humans going to be like? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you're right. And there are no like big meta-analysis studies that look at attention span and how it's changed with cell phones, but there have been a couple of preliminary studies with like a small number of people that show the more time you spend on your phone, the more your attention span decreases. I even remember hearing about this when I was a kid, and people would say, if you watch SpongeBob SquarePants, you're going to have a worse attention span than watching something on PBS like Arthur. We absolutely live in a world where we are constantly having our focus and attention taken away. And I do think it's going to change how our society works and functions, because no one can sit and focus on something for a prolonged period of time anymore. It's becoming more and more of a rare thing. And so some of the numbers and studies are starting to come out saying that that's happening. That's something that is happening. But even just in my own personal life, I'm noticing that the more I'm on my phone, I have a hard time sitting and watching a movie. I have a hard time in sitting and focusing on something. Sometimes when I'm reading, I get anxious. If I've been reading for like 20 or 30 minutes in a row, I feel like I gotta be doing something else. I gotta be going. So I feel like I've noticed that in myself, which is a big reason why I wanted to dive into this topic and look at a lot of the research, is because I was seeing it in everyone around me. I was seeing it in myself. And I think it's really important that we address it.
I think that getting prepared for the Internet is Crack podcast has definitely adjusted my attention span downward, because I have been going through Instagram, TikTok, and those guys have the most recent information, right? It's weeks before it hits the New York Times. About the chips, about AI, all this stuff. But I have noticed in myself, if I'm not engaged within the first 5 seconds, and I have been ashamed of myself, like, I'm a filmmaker. What am I doing? I am not allowing this person to have a moment of my time to draw me in. And I feel almost sort of, it's almost a moral thing for me as a filmmaker to not be giving people their due time to express themselves.
Right.
And it's changed definitely for me over the last couple of years as we've prepared for this.
Yeah. To expand on that point, I've always wondered whether or not I wanted to do more Instagram stuff, more TikTok stuff, and it's something I'm back and forth with all the time, because one of my main messages is that tech and social media is terrible for you, and it just feels so hypocritical for me to make TikToks about that.
Right.
But I've made a couple of TikToks in the past, and a couple of them have been like mildly successful, a couple thousand views, and even the ones that do well, that have a couple of thousands of views, if you go into the analytics and actually look at how long the average person watches that TikTok, say it's a 20-second TikTok, most people only watch it for a little over 2 seconds before switching away. And that just blows my mind that even if you get a view, most people don't even spend the time to watch it past 2 seconds.
Mr. Beast, do you know who Mr. Beast is?
I hear that name all the time.
He's the world's most
popular, I don't know either.
He's the world's most popular YouTuber.
Oh.
And like, people have offered him billions of dollars for his channel. But he was saying that before he started his channel, there were a few guys he was friends with, and they would go over obsessively what makes a viral video. And he said they would study for weeks just the thumbnail.
Yeah.
I mean, just the thumbnail that would grab people's attention. And he says, I would rather have a hardworking person who has no experience with film than a filmmaker, because they're going to try to make a film, and that's not what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're not making films. We're making a viral video.
It's about what gets your attention quick.
What do you think about artificial intelligence? What's going to happen then?
I think this stuff is if we think it's going fast now, it's only going to become faster.
Yeah, and I don't think that, personally, I don't think it's going to be healthy for us. It's too fast. I don't know who said it, but someone said, like, what happened, it was through thousands of years, AI is ready on Thursday. It's going quick.
Yeah, it's incredibly quick. I do think if there is one invention that will immortalize humanity, it'll be artificial intelligence. If we have something that could potentially outlive us, outlive nuclear war, travel all over the galaxy and not age and be able to transmit our information, our language, that's an incredible thing. So it's cool. And from a sci-fi lover, that's an incredibly cool concept. But you're going to have major corporations and tech companies using it to try and manipulate you even farther and more effectively to get you to use their products even more.
We interviewed an employee at Google who said, it's in our trailer. He says it will become like crack or heroin because they are going to know you so well. They're going to feed you exactly what your fantasy is or what you need to stay, and it'll be impossible to put your phone down. That's what he says. So
yeah, and he even said like how Google or whoever is like pushing even in countries that don't even can afford a phone or even can afford it, but if they can get internet, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I even sorry, but
I was just going to make a point that I always like to compare the tech companies and what they're doing now to the cigarette and smoking companies, what they did in the 50s, 60s, 70s. When the United States started pushing back on smoking, that's when the smoking companies started to develop more in third world countries, in developing nations. So I think the more we push back in the United States about it, the more they're going to focus their efforts on third world countries, and the more influence they're going to be able to have on politics, on news, in all of those countries, similar to what the smoking companies are still doing today.
Yeah, okay, I so can see that. It's terrifying, I think.
Yeah.
And when you see, you do adolescent psychiatry, so do you see this affecting social media and the internet in general, affecting your patients a lot?
Yes, it is a huge topic and something that historically psychiatrists didn't really ever have to ask about. So everyone has to put it on their radar and be intentional about asking about it. Yeah, I've got young people that I work with, teenagers that are on their phone from 12 to 14 hours a day. And I confirm that on their screen time app. I have them pull up their screen time app if they have an iPhone and show me what their daily average is. I've got parents who say, my kid never talks to me. He's in their room all the time on screens. I've got young kids who parents say about their kids, probably down to 6, 7 years old. They say the only thing that motivates them, the only weapon I have is taking their tablet away, is taking their screens away. They're not motivated by anything else. And that happens. I hear this almost every day. It is not something that's like, oh, every once in a while I have a patient who says this. So there are a lot of families that do well with it, that set good screen time limits, that try and keep this relatively under control. But I would say the vast majority of people, this is something that is impacting their everyday life, their everyday behavior, and their ability to connect and interact with their children.
Wow. Well, what is your... Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say on a personal level, I watch the videos to do research for this show, but I don't really participate in Facebook and Instagram any longer and I was surprised at how many people write a goodbye letter, on Facebook today. This is just not for me at this moment. So if you want to get in contact with me, here's my email address. But I'm, they're self-regulating because I think it becomes, it's data points that are not reality. And I can imagine if it makes me feel bad, how a 14 or 15-year-old is going to feel seeing data points that they're taking at the top of the curve, right? You don't put a photo of you unless you look good and unless you have the new car and all that stuff. So I think that it has, do you see an effect on the children you work with feeling less than?
Yes, all the time. Kids, they don't have a fully developed frontal lobe. When we talk about brain development, that's kind of the main part which is the part right in the front of your brain that helps you determine and make good decisions. But young kids are always making comparisons, and that frontal lobe is not fully developed, so they can't tell themselves, oh, that's when the other person's at their peak. That's the one glimpse of their life they're willing to put on social media because it's the best they look, the best time in their life. So they think, oh, that might just be what they look like all the time. That person's crushing it in life. Why am I not doing that well? Why am I not standing on a beach with a Corona with some hot girl standing next to me? So yes, we have noticed that since the invention of the smartphone, since the iPhone came out in 2007, that mental health problems slowly were creeping up and getting worse. The pandemic was a huge catalyst and made a lot of that stuff worse quickly. But I hear it all the time. Kids are constantly comparing themselves to others online, and it is an image that is unattainable. And so they're constantly thinking that they're not good enough. They have guilt and shame because of it, and it's bad for their mental health.
Yeah, I can see it. I think not even children, only children, even as a grown-up. Yeah. You see, oh, my friends are doing this, or oh my God, are they eating every day, or they're doing this, or whatever. Like you'd naturally, I think, start to compare yourself. And I'm sure like people say it all the time, don't do it. But you kind of still do. And it's like, oh, their life is so great. My life is not that good. I'm not, Yeah. I think anxieties and all that would be more just because of it. And what is your recommendation for parents? Like, what would you tell parents who are new parents or whatever? Like, you don't want your child to get addicted from the beginning, but how do you don't? The phones are there, everything is there. Mm-hmm. What's your advice?
It's incredibly hard because these devices, this technology is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. How many people have a couple of smartphones, a couple of tablets just sitting in a drawer in their house not being used, that when a child comes of age, they say, hey, Dad, are you using this? Mm-hmm. Like, can I use this? Before you know it, it's got a bunch of games and a bunch of texting apps. The main advice I like to give parents is try and hold off when they're young. Once the cat's out of the bag, I see 4-year-olds who are on their tablets for hours every day, who crave it, who want it, who throw huge tantrums if they don't get their tablet when they want it. So I'd say if you can hold off, don't give it to them. Don't let it's kind of entertaining, even with my baby. Like, it's kind of entertaining to watch him try and figure it out. But I have made an active, and not to say that I'm perfect by any means, but a conscious decision to say, I don't want this to be a thing. I don't want him to start learning how to figure this out. I want to hold this off as long as possible. I want him to try and make real world connections with toys, with me. So hold off on it. If the cat's out of the bag, set screen time limits. And don't rely on yourself to do it. Don't say like, oh, I'm only going to let them be on for a half hour every day. Actually set a screen time limit on the device that shuts off automatically after 30 minutes to an hour. Because if your kid perceives that you are in charge of it, you're manipulatable. You can be changed. You can be negotiated with to get more screen time. You can act up a little bit if you know that you can get a little bit more screen time if it pacifies you. But if it shuts off automatically, there's no question. There's nothing to try and negotiate or argue against. Another tip I always try and say is do all this stuff for yourself too. Set screen time limits. Erase social media off your phone. Keep it on your computer. Keep your accounts, sure. But having it in your pocket available at all times is toxic and it's not good. And you end up spending more time on your phone than with your kids, even if they're right in front of you. So those are some of the basic stuff that I would recommend that you can kind of do on an individual level.
Yeah, that's a really good advice. I should put screen time on mine. But this is so easy. I
just think it's so amazing that we have to talk like this, though. I mean, just the fact that we are talking like this about this substance is kind of mind blowing, isn't it?
Yes. And that was what I really wanted to emphasize in the TED Talk, is that when you think about addiction, what usually comes to mind is drugs and alcohol. But there are behavioral addictions. For example, sex, gambling, the things that drop dopamine or increase dopamine in your brain naturally by giving you that natural sense of reward. And phones have figured out a way to not only be incredibly effective at it, but continue to learn and become more effective at dropping dopamine, or I guess I keep saying increasing dopamine in your brain over time. So I wanted to get people thinking about this, that we have to start being aware of what is going on, what the tech companies are intentionally trying to do, and so that we can start pushing back on this as a society.
Yeah. I have one thought, if I can ask.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Now I'm totally losing it here. With the algorithm, I feel, for example, let's say Spotify, or whatever or Netflix or whatever, they only show what kind of music you want to listen to, only the kind of movies you want to watch, kind of, to do the whole, it's just coming. So I start feeling that I like, soul and funk and, that kind of music. But I never hear country on my stations. I would never hear any other things on my, same with the movies. And I just feel like we're getting taught what to do. Even my car, if I jump in the car, it tells me you have, 10 minutes to Trader Joe's, or you have whatever store or work, and it already is like it knows you. But I don't know if that's a good thing.
Good point. And I will say that based on your Jimi Hendrix and Charlie Parker poster behind you, that you have excellent taste in music. I actually have that same Charlie Parker poster.
Do you? Oh.
I do, yeah. I think I got it when I was a teenager, so it's been a long time.
I had it one for a long time.
But
good.
You make an excellent point that I think the word echo chamber is really important in thinking about this stuff. You get fed the stuff that the algorithm thinks you're going to like, and most likely you are going to like. But that doesn't introduce you to new concepts. It doesn't get you introduced to new ideas. And it gets you really comfortable. It gets you to trust. Like, say you have a Pandora station that you love, you trust, and you get used to that. If a song comes on that you maybe have never heard before, you think, well, this is my favorite station. It's got all my favorite. I should probably like this, right? Because it's the same kind of vibe as what. So you end up trusting those things a little bit more, maybe than you should, instead of looking at it more objectively. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's narrowing our ideas and narrowing our introduction to new concepts and new media.
Yeah, I think we're getting close-minded.
Yeah.
Surely but slowly, some kind of way, anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
No, I think it doesn't. I think they're, as we're preparing to do this podcast, it's absolutely amazing to me that it knows exactly what. And there are times I send Caroline the, the clip or the reel when I think it's something that will be of interest. And sometimes it will be 3 or 4 in a row. Mm-hmm. And they know exactly what I'm looking for. And I think these VR headsets are also going to be damaging because you can pretend be in the same room with somebody, which incentivize you even less to go outside and meet that person. So I don't know what you think about that. Are you worried about these headsets at all?
Yeah, because like you said, you don't have as much incentive to go out. But at the same time, I think it opens up a couple of interesting doors for teletherapy. I think feeling the presence of someone else in the room is something that can help. Feeling like someone's really there, someone is really listening. Because some of the studies on connections through social media, connections through the internet, show that they tend to be hollow connections. They don't give you a sense of community. They don't give you a sense of depth. And they don't give you a sense of being connected to something greater like in-person interactions do. So I'm wondering if that could help bridge the gap, feeling like you actually are in the same room and making the technology side of it less damaging and it less increased to the loneliness, because we are in somewhat of a loneliness epidemic and pandemic in the world right now. So curious on the bright side of things, to see if it actually helps with that.
Well, that's a very interesting point. Yeah. I would never even think about that.
Yeah.
That's very good. Yeah.
But I haven't tried any of them yet. I tried a little bit of VR video games, and the first time I tried it, I got like really motion sick. So hoping that part gets better. But it does appear to be the wave of the future. It is something that is inevitable. So that's the thing with all of this stuff, with cell phones, with virtual reality, with AI. The cat's out of the bag. We're never going to be able to go back to a time when this did not exist. So I think we have to learn how to coexist with this stuff and set healthy boundaries so that it doesn't impact our mental health the way it has been for the past 15, 16 years.
And as we've said in our trailer, I mean, what's just amazing is, well, I guess there's a bunch of debate about how long humans have actually been around, but 200,000 years approximately, 200 to 300,000 years approximately. And now we've had the internet for about 30 years. Yeah. And it has so changed us mentally, I believe. Would you agree with that? I know you're young, but if you were practicing psychiatry in 1985, I think you would have a whole different world of problems than you have in 2024.
You're so right. I'm actually, speaking of like Jimi Hendrix and Charlie Parker, I'm kind of an old soul. So a lot of times my friends always ask me, like, do you feel like you should have been born earlier, lived through the 60s? Because I love the music from the 60s. And I always say, absolutely not. Because I was born in 1991, which is the exact same year that Tim Berners-Lee invented the internet. So in my lifetime, I get to grow up with the internet. I get to see how much things are going to change in one human lifetime. And I get some criticism for this comment from time to time, but I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility that we are going to be able to figure out aging in my lifetime with our genetic modifying CRISPR technologies, with artificial intelligence. I think it's possible that we could figure out aging within the next 100 years, and that's kind of a pipe dream. So in the natural course of a human lifetime, I should say, to see how much humanity changes in a 90 to 100 year period. Because yes, this is pushing us farther and faster than any technology has ever done before. And one of the quotes, or one of the lines from the TED Talk was that it took over 100 years for the original telephone to democratize, where everyone had access to it. And the cell phone did it in less than a fifth of the time. Like the smartphone did it in less. So like the internet is changing things, and things are moving so much faster. So yes, it is changing humanity. It is changing the way our brains work. It is changing probably natural selection in a lot of different ways too, which is kind of exciting just to see how an invention from a species can change a species. But whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether I'm thinking too black and white, it's probably going to be somewhere in the middle. I'm curious to see what happens.
Yeah, me too.
Of interest to me is that I grew up without the internet.
Yeah.
And I'm a different person, I would say. I would say I'm a very different person because of the internet than I was growing up without the internet. I think I think you work with adolescents, and I think people mainly think of its effect on children, but I think it's a huge effect on adults.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. it is impacting everyone in this world right now, either directly if you have a smartphone. Even the people who don't have smartphones are impacted by this on a daily basis too. Everyone is being impacted by it. You cannot escape it.
Well, my dad is a mathematician, and I have Chat GPT on my phone, and he started asking me questions to ask it. Now, he doesn't have Chat GPT on his phone, and he was just absolutely blown away. It knew his theorems. He says, "How does it know my theorems?"
Whoa!
And well, one of his more, it's simple only to mathematicians, but he has a theorem which is the product of row reduced matrices is row reduced, and he said, "Ask Chat GPT what the product of two row reduced matrices will be," and it came back and it said it will be row reduced, and that's a theorem my dad proved. And
whoa,
he's just like, "What's happening?" He was like, "I guess am I needed anymore?" Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, those have been, I think that just, it blows my mind away. And I wonder about that too. Like, you keep hearing people saying like AI will take over, I assume, more technical work, anything from accountants to, now mathematicians. But anyway, and if that would happen, there will be less and less work. I mean, I talked to one guy who is a software developer, and you used to have people calling before to get business. And he said, now I'm using AI, getting so much business, getting this, so all this, certain jobs are just going to disappear quite fast. And I wonder, and I think we're wondering, what would happen if a big percentage of work will disappear to the machine because the machine is doing it so much better and faster, have no feelings, don't care about certain things, just brilliant. It just does it. What would happen? Simple question, like a lot of us are identifying by our jobs.
Yeah.
This is who I am because this is where I'm going. And what's your thoughts about that?
It goes back to what we were talking about with how it's going to fundamentally change humanity, what the human experience is. Because for thousands of years now, it's been you work, you try and get food, you try and take care of your family, but in the future that might be totally different. And we have an opportunity where we could potentially set things up for universal basic income, where, Yang Gang, I don't know if you guys are Yang people out there. I know he was thinking about, what was the freedom dividend or whatever? Well, there are a lot of questions, and this is completely uncharted territory. I feel like, or at least this could be wishful thinking, I'm hoping that mental health providers are going to be somewhat on the last of the list of people who get their jobs taken by AI. But they're already working on chatbots that can do cognitive behavioral therapy. And they're pretty good so far. It's interesting to see how quickly those have come along too. So how we regulate it, how we push back on this, how we have our politicians try and put some framework around this stuff to make sure that the change doesn't happen too fast. Because I just watched I think it was a John Oliver's piece on DoorDash and food delivery services, how once AI and drones take over, they're going to get rid of all their delivery people. Once Uber and Lyft can have self-driving cars, they're going to get rid of all their drivers. Industry is going to do what's going to make them the best money, or the most money. That's capitalism. So we have to be advocating for some of these things so that it doesn't happen too fast, so that people actually have time to transition, learn new skills, and people aren't just fired in droves because AI and technology is taking over their identity and their livelihood.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the internet is, it's exploding in ways we can't even imagine. I mean, I think AI is going to absolutely change what it means. Yes, growing up without the internet, it was your job, and I'm a filmmaker and I watch, they haven't been making films, completely computer-made films yet, but I watched a film that was made only using footage garnered from AI. Wow. And it was amazing.
Yeah.
It was an amazing film. And am I going to be needed? Is a filmmaker going to be needed? Do they know how to edit better than me? Do they know what questions to ask? I mean, I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I think that the customer service people, well, that's kind of the same skill as being a documentary filmmaker, asking what you need. No, it is, it's asking the question, and they're good at it already. Mm-hmm. And somebody pointed out something, which is, this is the worst AI will ever be at this moment.
Yeah.
Only going to get better. So what do you see in childhood for somebody 10 years from now? What do you think you're going to be dealing with for 10 years from now with the children that come in to see you?
I'm hoping that we can put some roadblocks on the technology thing. I know that the state of Colorado, and where I am right now, and another coalition of states are suing Meta, Facebook, for intentionally and knowingly hurting the mental health of children, not doing anything about it or telling the children or parents about it. So I'm hoping that we can move this stuff in the right direction, but I think it's going to probably take even longer than 10 years. And I think in 10 years, we're going to see all of the problems that we're seeing right now get even worse. Depression, anxiety, loneliness, temper tantrums, delayed social development in children. You talk to a lot of teachers these days, and a lot of them are saying that children are different than what they used to be. They don't have a lot of the emotional intelligence that they did, the emotional regulation skills that they did in the past. They're behind, they're delayed. And yes, COVID was a big part of that, but I also think that a big part of that is how much time they spend on their screens. Because in child psychiatry, we understand that kids learn through interaction, that interactions with peers, interactions with parents, getting in trouble, figuring it out, apologizing, problem solving, all that stuff in the real world isn't happening as much because kids are spending hours a day on their screens. So they don't have as much of the regulation skills as they did in the past. So I think we're just going to keep on seeing all of these problems compounding even further.
Very interesting.
It is. I mean, that was, it makes me sad to hear, like how, especially for children, that I always say to myself, like I'm getting old. I'm not so worried about me and my addiction, but I'm really worried about children. As what you said, the development. What actually will happen with them? How will they have a 6-year-old kid today? And also, as we see, like the technology is changing every day, every second. It's so fast. But how would they be at 15? How are they going to be when they are in our age?
I know no studies have been done with MRIs, but do you think that there is a change in the brains of human beings due to the internet?
Yes, I do not know of any studies that have looked at changes in anatomy, but I do think the physiology of the brain, we can pretty safely say, has changed. Because all our brains run on neurohormones, and the fact that we get so much dopamine all the time in our brains is changing the way we give and pay attention to things. And also our emotional regulation areas of our brain are not as well controlled. So yes, we can't really necessarily see anything on scans, but we have evidence that our brains are not functioning in the same ways that they have in the past.
Do you think nothing is seen because nobody's doing it, or because it doesn't exist?
Good question. It takes really big changes to see, like you can do functional MRI studies and you might be able to see stuff there in terms of how quickly amygdalas are firing. But I don't know, since all of this stuff is so new and only has really been in the last couple of years, I don't know of any studies offhand that's actually looking. Plus, it's really hard to get a control group because almost every single kid has been exposed to a lot of this stuff already too. So it's hard to know. But I should say, yeah, I don't know of any studies off the top of my head looking at that.
Yeah. And I'm divorced, and I can speak to even using, I use my phone to find my next wife, which I find absolutely amazingly freaky. Sometimes I'm looking at these pictures and I'm like, this person has a whole life. And when you don't meet somebody in person, it's so very strange. This person has a whole life, and I'm like swiping through, and it feels very different than meeting somebody. I will say that,
Yeah, I find it fascinating that the tech companies have found a way to monopolize the dating industry. Yeah. How they completely shifted everything in the past, 10, 15 years? It's completely changed. And I think they're going to find more and more ways to incorporate themselves into stuff that used to be a natural part of human life, because people are spending so much time on their phones anyway that's going to end up being the only way to actually do it. And I think the way dating apps are set up in and of themselves are toxic and setting people up for failure.
Oh, totally.
Because, I've watched a couple of videos of people who say like, oh yeah, well, I can set my filters to, I don't want anyone under 6'2". I want to have someone with blue eyes. I want to have someone with blonde hair. And they set up all these filters. And if you actually look at the percentage of the population that fits that criteria, it's like less than 0.1%.
I've heard that a male over 6 feet tall who earns over $100,000 a year is only 3% of the male population.
Yeah.
And and I would say my female friends, that would be a minimum that they would require. And it's only 3% of the population.
It's crazy. And I got to tell you one little story because I think it's funny. I would never, ever have met my spouse if we would have met online because of just what you said. I'm an artist, I'm all this. I wanted more exotic looking. I wanted this, whatever I wanted. And the love of my life is an engineer. Long, tall. One of the first lines was, oh, I don't like movies. Oh my God, I do not like movies. But we are perfect together. We have more fun than anyone else would ever have. We have, been married many years. And that's my joke when with this. It's like we will never have met online because of just that, oh, this is what I think. I want that kind of person. You don't know.
And the perception of our society is that these dating apps are so good. Everyone's having more sex than ever before. Everyone's hooking up. But studies are showing that people are less connected. People are having less sex than previous generations. That our generation and the young kids growing up aren't connecting, despite having the ability to find someone on their phone within a couple of miles who might be interested. And I've read some articles that say that a couple of people, like the super attractive people and the ones who know how to set up a good profile, they do really well on social media. And they might be very vicarious and have lots of good sexual interactions. But the vast majority of people end up being really frustrated and feeling like they can't find anyone on those apps, that it doesn't work for everyone. It only works for a select few, which is probably also leading to the loneliness and sadness. And another really important part that I want to bring up too is that dating apps, social media, all of this gives you a perception of choice. Makes you think that you have all of these hot, attractive people just a click away at all times. And that's not real. It's not tangible. the idea is, oh, you need to be trying this hot person. Oh, maybe you click on this hot person. Instead of trying to develop and invest your time into a tangible in-person relationship that is meaningful for you in your life.
Mm.
Well spoken.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Well, we're at 55 minutes. Do you want to maybe just sum up your feelings about the internet with regard to the brain and what you sort of see going forward and what you would like to see going forward?
Sure.
Yes.
So I think social media and the internet and technology is crack. It is the most addictive, widely used behavioral tool in the world right now. It came on incredibly fast. These things are designed to be addictive, designed to keep your attention. And I think as a society and as individuals, we need to start pushing back on this stuff. Trying to cut down your own screen time, getting rid of your most used and addictive apps, setting screen time limits, encouraging our politicians to start putting people first and pushing back, setting limits on children, setting limits on adults as well. Why not? We need to be able to put ourselves and our children first, because right now we're letting these tech companies give almost everyone in society a substantial addiction, and it's not good for us. It's not good for our development, and it's time we start pushing back.
I 100% agree.
100%. 100%.
100%.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Romano. We really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Taking time
Thank you.
to speak with us.
Absolutely. It was a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and you guys had very awesome, insightful questions. It was an excellent conversation. I enjoyed it tremendously.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching or listening to The Internet is Crack. Join us next Monday when we have Professor Douglas Jones on the show. He is one of the world's leading experts on election integrity, and he will also talk about the birth of the internet. You can watch us or listen to us on YouTube or Spotify or many other outlets. And don't forget to follow us on social media. See you next Monday.